When it comes to violent rhetoric, I'll make a lot of jokes. Now, conservatives supposedly make a lot of jokes. They said, I remember when Elon bought X that comedy was legal again. Apparently it's not, because I catch a lot of heat for some of my tweets.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So we have got something really special today. A political commentator and streamer known for long-form debates walks into Yale University and sits down with some of the sharpest student debaters on campus. The topic that absolutely explodes the room is whether Stephen's style of political commentary is actually making the division in this country worse. And trust me, the student who goes up against him comes prepared. Stay all the way to the end, because the final exchange between these two is the kind of moment you will want to rewind and watch twice. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. I genuinely love seeing where this community is spread across the globe. Alright, let's get into it.
For round 3, we turn to a more personal and media-focused question. The topic is Destiny's rhetoric inflames the political climate. On this round, we have Hannah Owens, the president of Yale Effective Altruism and the member of the Yale Debate Association. Hannah will be arguing that Stephen's style of rhetoric makes the political climate much more polarized. Stephen, of course, will have a chance to defend and respond to your approach. Hannah, you can start us off.
So, Destiny, you have made statements such as, conservatives need to be afraid of getting killed when they go to their events so that they turn down the temperature. You repeatedly refused to condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk. I won't woo over that. And after his murder, you tweeted making fun of his death, saying, I heard when he died he fed an entire village of vampires because so much blood came out of his neck. Following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which killed one of his supporters, you said that you have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or to anyone who supports him. You have also said that your only regret is that Trump's assassin didn't spend enough time practicing first. So there are a couple of things wrong with this. First, it's hypocritical. You cannot claim that Trump is a threat to democracy while simultaneously calling for political assassinations, which are a threat to democracy. You have also criticized left-wing figures for doing the same thing, like when the streamer Hassan tweeted a picture of a makeshift gun at Senator Tom Cotton. Second, it's immoral. As a public live streamer with millions of viewers, you make it more likely that someone in your audience will take matters into their own hands and start killing off conservatives, especially as a study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies found that left-wing political violence now outnumbers right-wing political violence. Third, it's bad for the country. Your rhetoric amplifies the extreme left and right. When conservative influencers like Matt Walsh say that the left wants me dead, your statements provide proof to that claim. There's a reason why extreme left-wingers like Hassan retweeted your statements about Trump's assassination. Political polarization destroys politics at the state and national levels when parties are unwilling to work together, and the Journal of Democracy finds a clear link between political polarization and political violence. And fourth, I think it's bad for you personally. You could be much more influential than you are right now if you didn't make extreme and hateful statements like these. You have a history of doing this that exceeds Republican behavior. You were deplatformed from Twitch for inciting violence during the BLM riots, and the mayoral candidate with whom you campaigned with had to cut ties with you for your hateful rhetoric. And since your goal is to help Democrats, I'd say that your rhetoric harms the movement that you claim to support. Ultimately, you are personally responsible for the extreme and divisive political climate that you critique. Your rhetoric inflames the American political climate, and I think that you have a net negative impact on the political space.
Jeez. Okay, so for my response to this is something that I've been stressing to people. There are two things that people see, and there's a third thing that people don't see. When it comes time to be civil in a conversation, both sides have to agree to that. One side can't agree and the other side not agree, and one side can't force agreement on that. And this is a thing that conservatives have been relying on liberals not understanding for decades. When one person, comes into an area to start a fight with another person, that other person fighting back is not being hypocritical, is not being immoral, and is certainly not engaging in the same action as the person who came in to start the fight. So when when it comes to speaking about, say, you talk about how I never condemned the murder of Charlie Kirk, or I never said that the murder of Charlie Kirk is bad. It's actually not true. On that Piers episode where I was fighting with all the conservatives about it, I think twice on that show I said, yeah, nobody should be getting killed for political violence in the United States, but the right will not say this. And that is an unacceptable world where one side of this country has continuously, over and over again, disavowed political violence. I'm talking about like the political leaders. I'm talking about the Joe Bidens, the Barack Obamas. I'm talking about the difference is when the assassination attempt was made against Donald Trump, Joe Biden gave a speech. He didn't blame either side. He said that everybody just needed to bring things down. He didn't mention that the shooter was Republican. He didn't blame Trump for his rhetoric. When Donald Trump was supposedly being hunted by Iran, Biden increased his Secret Service personnel, even though he had no obligation to. Meanwhile, Donald Trump stripped Secret Service protections from Kamala Harris and other Democrats as soon as he was in office because he, I won't say what his motivations were. I don't even know if he knows what his motivations are sometimes. And Donald Trump continues to do one-sided attacks against only one section of the country when it comes to calling for people to stop being violent. He went on Fox and Friends a day or two after Charlie Kirk was dead, and he said that when the left wing does violence, it's because they're evil. When the right wing does violence, it's just because they're just tired of the left wing doing it. When Biden was running for president, he had to disavow all the violence of the BLM protests. When Donald Trump ran for president the second and third time, he did it with the promise of pardoning every single January 6ther and every single person around him that was engaged in seditious conspiracy or a number of other crimes that were doing it to further Trump's interests. And he followed through with all of those pardons.
This is the moment where the entire double standard gets exposed, and I need you to pay close attention because what Stephen is laying out here is not just a debate point. This is something that has been building for years, and nobody on the mainstream level was willing to say it out loud the way he does here. Hannah comes in with a full prepared argument. She has studies, she has examples, she has receipts. And on the surface it sounds convincing. She is pointing at Stephen and saying, "Your rhetoric is the problem. Your words are making this country worse." And I get why that argument lands for some people at first, but here is what changes everything. Stephen does not get defensive. He does not apologize. He goes straight to the foundation and says something that most political commentators are too scared to say. He said civility only works when both sides agree to it. You cannot have one side playing by every rule, while the other side throws the rule book out the window and then turn around and blame the first side for the chaos. And here is what makes this historically interesting. This is not a new problem. You can go back decades and find the same pattern playing out. One side escalates. The other side is told to stay calm and take the high road, and somehow the side escalating never gets held to the same standard. Stephen is basically calling out a cycle that has repeated itself over and over, and most people just accept it as normal. Then he brings the receipts. He talks about how one leader gave a unifying speech after a major political moment, did not point fingers, did not assign blame, told the country to calm down. And then he flips it and points out that the other side stripped security from political opponents the moment they had power. And here is what Stephen said that hit different. He said the man who was supposedly protected went out of his way to protect the person who was considered his enemy. That is not weakness. That is actually what leadership looks like. And then Stephen lands the point about the pardons. When you run for office on a promise to pardon people convicted of serious crimes and then follow through the moment you win, that is not just rhetoric. That is a governing philosophy. That is telling your base that consequences do not apply to your side. You have to understand why this matters so much. Stephen is not just defending himself here, he is making an argument about the entire political environment and who actually created it.
When it comes to violent rhetoric, I'll make a lot of jokes. Now, conservatives supposedly make a lot of jokes. They said, I remember when Elon bought X that comedy was legal again. Apparently it's not, because I catch a lot of heat for some of my tweets, but they have no problem when it comes time to making jokes about Paul Pelosi, when he was almost beat to death by a guy in his house with a hammer, only because the cops showed up. The guy didn't get to go through with it. They have no problem making jokes or conspiracy theories about different shooters. Donald Trump didn't even acknowledge the death of the two Minnesotan lawmakers, or the one Minnesota lawmaker and her husband, and the other one that was attempted to be killed. When he was asked about this in the White House, he said, who? He didn't even remember it. This environment is not equal. So all this is said, and the most common response to me is basically, well, aren't you just making it worse? So I don't think that standing there and allowing yourself to have the most unbelievably inflammatory, hateful, disgusting, just threatening remarks made at you as a side over and over and over again by one side and remaining quiet, I don't think that there is any virtue in that. I think insofar as you allow yourself to be ran over and destroyed by one side that has absolutely no limitations on how they conduct themselves, I just don't see what the virtue is in that. I've heard people online who have said things like, I was going to make this joke about this particular thing, but I know if I say this, Destiny's going to come at me and make this comment about it, so I'm not going to say anything about it. I think it's good that if you're a conservative and you read something that I say and that really, really pisses you off, really gets the snowflake twinkling or whatever, if that happens, good. I think you should feel upset. And maybe, just maybe, the next time Trump makes an unhinged tweet or truth, maybe a conservative stops and thinks, maybe it's not okay to just support these statements as trolls or memes or epic jokes. And maybe if I'm trying to hold a YouTuber I'm watching online more accountable for his speech than I am the president of the United States, maybe there's something that's deeply wrong and flawed with that system that the conservatives could step back and take a look at.
I respond? Okay. So what I'm not calling for is for you or for Democrats at large to remain quiet, right? What I think I'm clearly calling for you is to not do the same thing that you're critiquing conservatives and Republicans for doing. If you think that's bad when Trump says inflammatory rhetoric, or if a conservative calls for a Democrat to be killed, you can no longer criticize that practice when you then turn around and say, I actually want the conservatives to be being killed, and I want Trump to be the one who's getting killed.
You recognize that my position is not the same as them, though, right? That when they say it's funny and hilarious when the left gets killed and we're going to never recognize our side, that when I say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to copy the same stuff you do until you're willing to mutually accept that we stop, that these positions aren't the same, because they're never willing to stop, right?
Okay, so do you think that that's what's going to happen? You think that you going out there and saying conservatives need to be killed is going to lead to the conservatives saying, oh yeah, I really want to compromise with this person. I want to work together with the Democratic Party.
So I've never said that conservatives need to be killed. Okay, I've never said that.
Wait, so you said specifically that they need to be afraid of getting killed so that they turn down the temperature. But how is someone afraid of getting killed unless there's a threat to their life?
Sure. So if you saw more than just what Jesse Waters decided to show on his program on Fox, the entire conversation I'm having there is that when conservatives talk about violence in the United States, it's like a sexy, fun thing for them. And when liberals talk about it, it seems to be more of like a fearful thing, like, hey, we all need to stop. When I hear conservatives talk about violence in the United States, they seem excited for it. And I think there's no fear there, and I think they should be afraid. There was never a call for violence. And if you listen to anything I've said, like, I'm out here doing these events. Clearly, I don't want people getting shot out here because I'm probably going to be the first one to go if that actually happens. What I'm saying is that, like, you can't speak about these things. Like, there needs to be a healthy sense of fear that, like, if we continue to escalate, we're going to end up in, like, some civil war status because conservatives act fearless when it comes to their rhetoric.
Okay, this part is where it gets really interesting because Stephen flips the entire comedy argument on its head, and I do not think Hannah was ready for it. There is this moment where Stephen brings up the idea that comedy was supposedly legal again after a certain platform changed hands, and he uses that to point out something that people conveniently forget. The same crowd that celebrated that moment had absolutely no problem making jokes about a sitting official's spouse being violently attacked in their own home. They had no problem spinning conspiracy theories about it. And the contrast Stephen is drawing is devastating because he is saying, look, I catch heat for tweets. These people celebrated a real violent event and nobody held them to the same standard. And here is what Stephen said that I think is the most underrated line in this entire debate. He said something along the lines of, if a conservative reads what I say and it makes them uncomfortable, good. Because maybe that discomfort makes them stop and think before they cheer on the next unhinged statement from someone in actual power. That is not calling for anything harmful. That is called consequences. That is called accountability through social pressure. Here is the educational piece that most people miss. There is actually a well-documented concept in political science called asymmetric polarization. It describes exactly what Stephen is talking about. When one side escalates and the other side is expected to absorb it without responding, the result is not peace. The result is that escalation becomes normalized. In the aggressive side learns there are no costs to going further. Stephen is essentially arguing that silence in the face of that is not virtue, it is permission. Then Hannah pushes back and asks whether Stephen actually thinks his approach is going to make the other side want to compromise. And Stephen's answer is sharp. He says it is more effective than just letting it happen without any response. And honestly, that is hard to argue with when you look at what playing nice actually produced over the last several years. The line that closes this section out is the one that stuck with me. Stephen says conservatives talk about escalation like it is exciting, like it is something to look forward to, and he says they should feel fear about where that road leads, not because he is threatening anyone, but because a country that stops fearing its own breakdown is already halfway there.
Yeah, but again, the same thing I would say, which I don't think was addressed, is do you think it's an effective strategy to get one side to negotiate with you to say that you're okay with them dying and it doesn't bother you if they get killed?
I think it's more effective than allowing them to do it, unimpugned, yeah.
Wouldn't it be more effective to say it's bad when they do it and that's how you can win voters to then get elected?
That didn't work last time, did it?
Oh, so you think just because Biden lost one election, that means that MAGA Republicans rule the country and that Democrats have no chance of winning unless they become authoritarian themselves?
I think Democrats will win the next set of elections, but I think the fact that Trump won says something is deeply wrong with the American public right now and is deeply wrong with our discourse. If Kamala would have won all 7 swing states, it wouldn't have been as much of a landslide as it should have been in that election. The reality is that the president makes on a daily basis unhinged tweets that would dwarf the entirety of an ordinary Democratic president's tweet history combined. I can probably find something he's tweeted today or yesterday that he said that's worse than the totality of everything said in his entire administration, for Obama, for Biden, for any of the Clintons. But Trump won his second election. So what happened there? Do you think that there's some virtue in Democrats just continuing to nod their heads and play along with Republicans and not act like all of the unhinged, insane rhetoric is coming from one side?
Yeah, again, I don't think that Democrats just need to go along with things. I think that criticizing one side, saying that they're engaging in some authoritarian practices or that they have very inflammatory rhetoric is an effective tactic, especially when you're not doing the same thing. You lose your ability to criticize one side if you advocate for your political side of the aisle to do the very same thing to conservatives.
If my position isn't the same, how do you lose the ability to advocate for it? If somebody comes into a room screaming and I say, okay, well, I'm going to scream at the guys, I guess, until you stop, our positions aren't the same. That person is just screaming for no reason. My position is responsive to their position. I don't
Sure.
That's how civility works. It's responsive to the other person's civility.
But what you're arguing is what, for instance, like Trump and conservatives are doing is a threat to democracy, right?
Yes.
And then you're saying, therefore, Democrats ought to do something which is also a threat to democracy.
It's
do you see
better
how you
to have
lose the ability to criticize the first thing?
That's like saying that if the North goes to war against the South, they lose the ability to criticize the South for seceding from the Union. I disagree with that. If one side is going to conduct themselves in a violent manner, then the other side should be able to conduct themselves similarly.
So just to be clear, you think if Democrats get into office, they should do a January 6th style insurrection because conservatives already did it, right? So why not just let fire go, right?
If we do it, hopefully we don't fail like they did.
Okay.
I think that there need to be severe repercussions for the current administration, up to and including anything that related to the Department of Justice, related to investigations, related to what maybe creative interpretations of the law like the conservatives have taken upon themselves to do. Yeah, because right now the pattern that we've set in the United States is that if you're a conservative, you can do basically whatever you want, and at the end of the day, the Democrats are going to show up to not only clean up your mess, but pretend you didn't do it and then try to play along with you.
So then what bothers me about that is Democrats really can't claim to be the party of democracy when you, again, make statements like this that, it'd be fine and actually preferable for us to create an insurrection that would overthrow the democracy to instate forever democratic rule, right? So would you agree that you can no longer criticize Trump or conservatives for being a threat to democracy?
No, because my position is not the same as theirs. I'm willing to play democracy as long as they're willing to play democracy, but I'm not going to play democracy while they play
it. You won't defend democracy when another side is attacking it.
One side can't defend civility. It has to be two sides.
This is where the whole debate collapses into one single truth, and I need you to feel the weight of what Stephen says here because it is genuinely one of the cleanest political arguments I have heard in a long time. Hannah asks whether Stephen's approach is actually going to make anyone want to compromise. And Stephen fires back with 4 words that shut the entire civility argument down. He said, "That did not work last time, did it?" And I want you to sit with that for a second because that is not just a clapback. That is a documented reality. The strategy of taking the high road, staying measured, refusing to match the energy of the opposition, was tried, fully, completely. And the result was not a more civil political environment. The result was that the other side just kept going. And then Hannah tries to trap him with the insurrection comparison, and honestly, I think she thought that was going to be the knockout moment. But Stephen does not flinch. He says something that is actually philosophically precise. He says if somebody walks into a room screaming at you and you eventually raise your voice back, your positions are not the same, because yours is a response. Theirs was the origin. That distinction matters enormously, and most people in politics refuse to acknowledge it because it complicates the both sides narrative that keeps certain media ecosystems alive. And then Stephen delivers what I think is the most honest thing said in this entire debate. He describes a pattern where one side can do basically anything and the other side is expected to not only absorb it, but pretend it never happened and then cooperate like everything is fine. Think about how exhausting that is. Think about what that does to a political movement over time. You cannot keep asking people to extend grace that is never returned, and then act surprised when they stop. The final line lands like a verdict. Stephen says he is willing to play by the rules as long as the other side plays by the rules. But he is not going to unilaterally defend a system that the other side is actively dismantling. And he closes it with something that should honestly be on a wall somewhere. One side cannot defend civility. It has to be two sides. That is not a radical statement. That is just how agreements work. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.